Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who lived in the 1st century AD, said the following quote: "To be afflicted with endless sorrow at the loss of someone is foolish self-indulgence, and to feel none is inhuman callousness. The best compromise between love and good sense is both to feel longing and conquer it." Now, that was in his Consolation to Helvia. And I realize esports pools, in fact, fantasy esports and betting didn't actually exist in the context of esports for Seneca because, as I said, he lived in the 1st century AD. But I think we can kind of take his words as a thought for today, for the modern day, because often people don't like to gamble, especially people, obviously, who are more inexperienced in life, because they get really angry when they lose, or they feel really sad that they lose. They feel really down, and they indulge those feelings. They just let those feelings run their course, and as such, they lose control. They can't handle it. Alternatively, you could say people who choose not to do anything. They don't choose to gamble. They don't choose to invest themselves in a team or to pull for a team. Listen, you never lose, but you never win as well, right? You're just kind of this removed, detached individual who observes the game, and you might achieve some objective point of view that allows you to fantastically analyze the game, but you won't really enjoy it. It won't be as meaningful for you. It won't be as significant because it doesn't connect to the values, to the things that you care about. You don't really care about it, right? So actually, for me, one of the reasons why, as long as you're someone who can responsibly handle it and you're in a state or country which permits such activities, gambling can actually be fun, is because beyond just liking a team or wanting them to win, you've actually got a stake in the game. Even if it's a team you don't like, but the odds were good and it's the underdog team and you're actually pulling for the favourite in terms of who you want to win, gives you another reason to enjoy if the other team can win, or if you get the satisfaction of being correct or having correctly analysed what the situation was. So a little Stoic philosophy applied to esports pools and fantasy and esports betting. Now, on the topic of who should work at majors in CSGO, you've got to first of all really ask yourself, what are the majors in CSGO? Like what sets a major apart from the other big tournaments in CSGO? Because I think that is a key element when you're talking about this. I didn't just say who should work at big CSGO events. That's a separate topic, and quite frankly, one which, while I have opinions on, I certainly wouldn't consider myself an authority on or an expert on, because it's very much down to the tournament organizer, in my opinion. So the majors, at least how I model them, how I conceive of the majors are CSGO's World Championship. Now, yes, because we have 2 in a year, we kind of have 2 World Championships. I think that's a positive. That's cool. I actually don't like it in games like Dota, like League of Legends, where so much rides on that one huge tournament. Yes, there's a circuit otherwise, and if you really know the nuances of the game and you're very fair-minded, you can judge who was the best without them having to win that one tournament. But the winning of that one tournament overwhelms and overshadows so much of the others. I like the fact that there's 2, so you can kind of average out over the year. If you were bad, if you had an off day at one World Championship, you got another one to play at. You don't have to wait a whole year necessarily. Now, not only are there the World Championships of Counter-Strike, but in my opinion, ideally, this is something I would aspire to them becoming, because I don't feel like they're quite there yet. I hope that they're a festival of Counter-Strike. That's why, in a sense, I do get why it's very important to teams just to qualify for the tournament, because you get to be part of the World Championship, even if you're the team that's going to go out in last place. It's also cool because you have the stickers, you'll be part of history to some degree. I mean, you can certainly debate how much Splice is really part of history, but listen, they were at a major. Some of those players will never accomplish anything else in their careers, but they were there in a way that, for example, some of the Immortals players up until recently had never played at a major. So there is a significance there. And so I would hope that just like BlizzCon for StarCraft 2 or the World Championship for League of Legends or the International for Dota 2 have not just the World Championship component, but this kind of festival around the game, celebrating the game as it is now, what people love about the game, what people love to watch, and the history of the game, appreciating the scene that's been created around this game over many years. I would hope it would be that. It's one of the reasons, by the way, as an aside, as to why I always think that team owners shouldn't let their players fly home after the first couple of days of a major if they get eliminated. I would first of all make them stay, just because I would try and like spark that competitive drive and desire in them by letting them have to watch the rest of the tournament. So if they're very competitive, they'll be like, fuck, I should be there, I should be in that final, I'll be there next time, and they'll be more driven. I also just think, because if it's going to be a festival in this sense, spend time, see fans, do media interviews, actually watch the matches so that maybe you pick up on some things, you get a feel for what the tournament was like, etc. I think that's actually a pretty cool element. Now, when I say that though, ultimately you boil it down beyond some of those factors, and the majors really should be Ideally, the aim should be for it to be the best CS tournament of the year, or that portion of the year, featuring the best teams, so good qualification system, and ideally the best format, because formats actually dictate to a large degree how good the matches are and how good the matches are at different stages of the tournament. But another aim, I think, on a secondary level, once you've got all those things in place, should certainly be to make the viewing experience the best. And that means putting on the best broadcast, hopefully with good production value, stage setups, the right producer, the right in-game observers, and also the best talent on camera. Your commentators, your analysts, your hosts, your stage interviewers, backstage interviewers. There's lots of different people that I think you can and should hire to make this the best. And even if you took care of every other aspect, technical or otherwise, or qualification, format, if you don't have the best talent, I think you're not going to add that little extra bit that can make it special. So one of the reasons why I made the distinction earlier on, why I'm not talking about just big events, like I'm not talking about like who should ESL hire for ESL Pro League, who should, whoever it might be, Star Ladder hire for a Star Ladder event, and picking people out of a hat here. Because ultimately, for those events, I generally think it's up to them who they hire. It's very rare you'll ever see me complain about someone not getting hired to one of those events. I actually think it's absolutely fine for those event organizers, those tournament organizers, to hire whoever they want. It's entirely their prerogative. They're paying to put those tournaments on. It's their business model, and they get the blame, they get the success. So if they don't hire someone really good, then they might get mocked by the community or thought to not be as good at an event, or it might take away some of the prestige. For example, think of some of the great commentators that might not get hired. Then they'll suffer the consequences of that in a market, in hopefully a free market. It's not really a free market entirely, but some components of it, especially compared to other esports games. And also, for tournament organisers who are just running their own tournament, I also think it is fair that they want to have their own flavour or their own style. Maybe they want to have it be more fun and more banter and more fun during the downtime. Maybe they want it to be more polished and people in suits looking very professional, that kind of an ESPN Sunday football type broadcast where it's all about wholesome entertainment and really putting on a professional show. Okay, that's cool if people want to go that approach. I mean, in the past, there were more of the events didn't just hire the top talent, and there were more kind of talent lineups that were more of a palette of colors, you know, certain shades, and you didn't see some at some events and you did at others. Like, for example, one of the reasons why in 2015 I worked heavily with DreamHack, Gfinity, and Faceit is because these are events that really stressed, because at the time ESL was kind of outstripping them to some degree. They wanted to stress, we're not ESL. So part of that was, let's go towards this banter, this fun, this kind of Top Gear environment, and let's make that our appeal, so it's an alternative appeal, and let ESL be the biggest and the industry leader and whatever at the time was kind of the flavor for ESL and the feeling amongst how they hired talent there. I mean, what I'm kind of saying here is, I don't want it to be that we're in a world where tournament organisers for their own tournaments get shouted down for certain things. Yes, it's certainly fine for fans to say, I'd like this person to be there. As I said, that's actually a consequence that should exist, whether for or against someone being at the event or not being in that case. But I certainly think tournament organisers can choose what duos they want to hire in line with the points before, or if they think some talent is overrated, certainly don't hire that person. They also might want to hire specific people purely to appeal to a home crowd, or depending on what teams are there. If there's someone who's just an NA expert, there's no NA teams there, I can understand why that person might not want to hire that person, even though it might be fantastically good. But I do think when it comes to majors, that majors aren't just your tournament. I mean, yes, you pitch your tournament to a major, to be a major, but once it's a major, it's something different. It's now the World Championship. It's now this special thing in Counter-Strike. It's a special piece of Counter-Strike history. And so I no longer think it is just about your decisions as the tournament organizer. And this is a key thing I want to make a point about, or what just generally everyone feels about it. Because I think that in line with trying to put on the best tournament, people should try to hire the best talent for the major, which means they shouldn't be letting industry politics get in the way. Now, when I say industry politics, I want to stress that does not mean situations like I had in the past with the MS1 Katowice 2014, where for obvious reasons, they didn't want to work with me at the event. And you could understand why that might have been a negative to have worked with me at that event. That's not the type of industry politics I'm talking about. I'm talking about people, world-class, legendary, people who, if there was a Hall of Fame for commentators and talent, will eventually be in one of those, who weren't hired for certain majors and certain events of that stature in CSGO, but also in other games, purely because the person doing the hiring didn't like them or had some beef with them stemming back years and years, or thought to themselves, but they used them at the last major that was run by someone else, so I want to give mine a different flavour, and I want to break up this great casting duo, and I want to put inside this casting duo, and so my event will be remembered as the one that had this one-off casting duo that no other event ever had. And I know that the one half the casting duo will break up because he doesn't want to miss the major as well. That's something that I find actually kind of gross, and I don't like, especially in the context of the major. Do that at your own events if you indeed want to. I also would hope it wouldn't be about purely personal preference, like not just you thinking, nah, that person's a bit overrated. If they're the best at strategical analysis or entertainment, or they know the scene the best of the particular teams that are there, obviously it's less of a regional thing when it comes to that. It comes to a major, obviously. I think if they're just the best, they should be hired, and you should try to fill out your panel as much as you can. And yes, if you have a limited number of people you can hire, you're going to have to miss some people. But if you're hiring 10 people, it should generally be 8 or 9 or 10 of the best people, ideally, not having weird picks. I think making weird picks or trying to promote someone beyond their ranks is an issue I have. And that's actually part of a problem with doing the talent for majors, I think, because on the other hand, you might say to yourself, but Thorin, you're in favor of meritocracy. I am. So when I say this next point, this is more for how a lot of people in the industry think, not me necessarily. I can see an argument that people have made in the past why, even if someone is very hot right now, they've just started, they've gotten very, very good very quickly, they seem like they're already like basically tier 1 talent, but they haven't done many events, haven't done many big events, they're still on their way up. I can see an argument for why some people would say don't invite them to the major. And I think it's a very tricky issue, because personally, I probably would, and I probably would give them the shot. But from a tournament organizer's perspective, I can see why they might think, right, well, we're going on merit, but you've also got to have proved yourself. Like, before you get to the major, you've got to do a bunch of big events, and you've got to do a bunch of events around the world and in different time zones and with different teams there, so we can really see what your chops are made of. I can see that to a degree. I can see why experience and status in the community would be a factor. So that one's more prerogative, I think, but I could make a case either way, I think. Because when you run a major, here's a key point I want to make. I don't think it is just your tournament anymore. It's not just Valve officiated and money's given to you by Valve, which is a big deal. But I think once you run a major, you're kind of a custodian of the World Championship and a part of CS history. Other events are CS history as well, but not as much. When you run a tournament, you are responsible for the World Championship, for that moment in history. It's not the same as simply having your own tournament with your own flavour and all that stuff. So as a result, it's important to the people who work as talent that they make it to some of these tournaments. I work as talent on the side. It's a side job I do. I do it almost roughly and evenly with journalism. Now, with that said, if I miss some majors, obviously I've had to miss some through my own choice, some through my own choice. Okay, that's not the end of the world. Sure, I'd like to be at them. I think they're important pieces of history, and I'd hope that if I do a good job at my style of analysis, that it would bring something more to the tournament and help enhance history. Sure, I think so. But I don't think it's the end of the world personally for me, always, if I don't get hired. But I do think for some of these guys who do this as a full-time job, it kills me when some of these people aren't hired, because I think it's really important they are. And I think that all the reasons I've listed above, these are the reasons keeping some of these people out. So let's go through some examples, some actually solid examples of people who didn't go to majors that they should absolutely have been at. So an obvious one to me was the E-League major, where YNK Yanko, arguably the best analyst in the world, perhaps the best strategical, tactical analyst in the world, one of a former pro, someone who's done many, many big events at that point in time. Experience was not an issue whatsoever. I think I've never personally known anyone who I considered competent and someone who watched CS a lot who still complained about his accent after about 4 events or 10 streams of listening to him. I never really knew a reason as to why he wasn't hired, but I thought he absolutely should have been hired. And I have to say, I think it was a bit of a travesty he wasn't. First of all, because his work wasn't rewarded, and he absolutely was an elite level talent. I even, by the way, behind the scenes, I mean, I can't go into this a lot, but I even basically told some people behind the scenes, if I'd known that it was like this, I would literally have said, I'll step aside. Don't hire me. Hire this person instead. That's how upset I was about this whole situation. Unfortunately, the way that whole thing went down, basically there was no position where anyone could have debated this or made such claims on negotiations. It was just a done deal at a certain point in time, and that's a sad state of affairs for everyone, quite frankly. In the past, there have been ESL majors where obviously I myself felt as though maybe I should have been hired and I wasn't. Now, again, I'm not talking about any of the Katowice events for 2014 or 2015, because for both of those, the first one, it's obvious that ESL probably shouldn't have used me at that point in time. Wouldn't be good for my own safety. Obviously, wouldn't make a very good broadcast. It would kind of sour and overshadow the event. The fact that I had my little rant, my jokes that people did not appreciate there in Poland, that makes perfect sense. Likewise, the next year. And by the way, if I was invited to 2015 or 2016 or 2017 for Katowice, I would turn the invitation down for some of the above reasons, and it's just not something that would work out. So that's not the ones I'm talking about. But for example, Cologne 2015, yeah, I do think that was a misstep on ESL's part. I think they did go too much into industry politics, or thinking that they would shake up and have a different flavour for their event, or a different panel of people, or promote some of their own people internally who maybe hadn't gotten that status or experience, or were even considered some of the best. I do think they went a little bit in that route. Now, obviously, I have a good relationship with ESL now. As far as I know, if they held a major, I imagine they would probably ask me to work it, and I probably would, depending on the location, as referenced before in the context of that. But it's not just me. And I have to say, part of the reason I wasn't hired for that event, yeah, I've heard people say internally they didn't like criticism I had of ESL, but they also didn't make any attempt to reach out to me at that point in time. They never attempted to forge a relationship or find out if there could be some middle ground. They never made any attempt because it was industry politics. But there have been other people who have been damaged by industry politics. So in the past, there was a ESL event, a major, that Anders didn't work out, when for my money he was already far and away established as the best commentator in the world, and that was down to industry politics. That was down to personal relationships behind the scenes, people thinking they could do certain things with the flavour of an event to purposely give a unique feel, but also to rattle some of the other talent. Likewise, Semler hadn't been at every single major, and that's because behind the scenes, some people thought he was overrated or thought they'd rather pair someone else with Anders. I mean, funnily enough, obviously they don't work together anymore, but that's irrelevant. These are people, Anders and Semler, especially in the early days, they 100% should have been at these events. Janko absolutely should have been at the events. I will just say on my own part, I think I should have been at Cologne. But there are instances like this. Now, as far as I know, the last few majors, except the E-League one with Janko, generally have covered all the bases. They've gotten all the top casters. They've gotten pretty much all the top talent in terms of the analysts and the people who break the game down, the interviews. In general, they do a pretty good job. But I just want to outline it in this video so that people can refer back to this. People can link to this video when we bring up these topics. Because I think the distinction is key between what you do with your own event and when you're custodian of a major. And I also think it's just a good message in general to make it a meritocracy for the biggest events. Because all the ones that matter the most in people's histories, that matter the most in your careers, that actually mean something for the history of the game and the development of the game. And so I think you're missing something if you don't have the best talent at those majors.
What in God's name is that from Thorin?